and welcome once again. So, everybody knows the present situation of Pakistan's economy. It is deteriorated, and it is so horrendous to see Pakistan's current economic turmoil. And what is the solution? How these issues can be mitigated? To discuss economic crisis, I have invited today a renowned economist with dynamic profile, highly respectable Sir Nadeem Haque. I would like to give a short intro about Sir Nadeem that he is a former Deputy Chairman Planning Commission, economist with long career, author of Looking Back that is available on bookstores and on Amazon as well. So do read this book. It is really insightful. And now let's get Sir Nadeem on board. Assalamu alaikum, sir. First of all, thanks a lot, to give me this opportunity to just, conduct an interview with you.
Gee, glad to be with you, Badaiya.
Okay. So, first of all, sir, you know that we will be talking about economy, and if I say that we look at the South Asian region conditions, Sri Lanka's current, crashing economy's condition, Afghanistan's unrest condition, and when we talk about IMF program, which didn't bring any kind of support to Pakistan's economy. So I also have a fear that we shouldn't become like, these countries, as where you know that dollar inflation, fuel inflation, wheat and energy scarcity, along with unrest political condition. So how do you see the whole scenario, if you'd like to share your thoughts about our Pakistan's economy?
Look, Pakistan's economy has always chugged along for two reasons. One is that we are a very youthful economy, very young country. Young countries always have a tendency to grow because young countries are capable of producing more because youthful vigor is with them. Secondly, we have a large informal economy which also works very well and which grows very rapidly. What holds us back is the fact that our official economy is always in trouble because our politics is in trouble and because we have administration that is antiquated and that administration is incapable of managing a modern economy and it flounders around trying to manage a modern economy. Thirdly, our politicians also have made too many promises to the people. That there is a promise of social insurance, that there is a promise of subsidies. Fourthly, we have a business sector that has grown into seeking subsidies rather than seeking export competitiveness. So for all these reasons, Pakistan seeks to grow. We get a growth rate up to about 4 or 5, 6%. And then our growth comes down because the structural weaknesses, the subsidies that are inherent in the system, the social insurance that is inherent in the system, the political competition, excessive political competition that is in the system, and excessive bureaucratic malaise that's in the system slows the economy down. So Pakistan is not likely to come to a very sudden halt or a sudden collapse of the economy. I think the IMF will come to save it, but yes, we came very close to it. We are very close to it, and we do have a lot of difficulties. But many of those difficulties have been created by these 4 or 5 factors that I gave you. And these factors, unfortunately, require deep reform and deep thought. We are not capable of doing that yet.
All right. So suppose you just told me all these problems, but still, about IMF program, where we always see that we never able, complete the programs and never ever help to sustain economic growth. So why do we always go to IMF as for plan or as for loans? So what do you think about it? What would be your thought?
Look, when we got independence, we were a country that kind of came out of colonial rule, but we didn't have any administrative, any other wherewithal in our country. And that, most important of all, we didn't have any skills. We didn't have any physical infrastructure or even soft infrastructure to the administrative infrastructure. So what we did was we copied the colonial infrastructure very quickly. But then we lacked the technical skills. We lacked the skills to make an economic policy. We lacked the skills to coherently shape our development agenda. And the result was that we kind of ceded that responsibility to international consultants. The Harvard Advisory Group first came in to give us advice on the economy, and they took over and they shaped our economic structure. After that, very quickly, USAID and the World Bank came in and they shaped our economic policy. But that meant that the policy structures that we had got into a lazy habit of always following international consultants. So even today, all our policies are made by international consultants. We do very little policy making for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that, related to that, the second thing is that politically, we are a country that has been always full of strife on on who will be in power. We have a huge struggle for power in our country, and that means the economy remains kind of second fiddle. In the middle, somewhere in the middle, we also developed the civil military strife. The military dictators came in. Military dictators did seek out economy as a way to seek a mandate. But unfortunately, within that also developed the debate of Islamic State versus an economic state. And we never really have resolved the fact, are we an economic state or not? Do we want to develop an economic state or not? That's part of the problem. But the second part of the problem is that we do not really have any economic policy making skills, and we are too beholden to the donors. And as we entered the debt crisis, as we accumulate more and more debt, we began to develop a debt crisis. So our way of solving the debt crisis is to seek more money, not to seek more reform. And we've been addicted to the IMF from the very beginning because it always had a balance of payments problem. And when we have a balance of payments problem, we run to the IMF, but we don't solve our deeper structural problems. The
Right.
structural problems that we have, which are the weak administrative state, the weak political state, as well as the inability to make good policy or inability to follow some economic reform, and then again our political commitments. So put all that together, we will always remain in the IMF fold unless we begin to reimagine a better economic state and reimagine a better structure of the economy to develop an economic state.
Correct. So, in Pakistani people's mind, it's like that, like, whenever they will just have to do forgo kind of investment plans, where that real estate is always highlighted. And I also heard from you that our stock exchange is also dying and has got no scope of growth in it. And you yourself, because I just heard you somewhere that you yourself tried, and for you, it was just like, failed you many times. And how do you see the real estate? And suppose people's mind is just always like to invest in kind of, property state. So what would be your thought on it? Like, why people's mind like that?
Kiran, the problem is not real estate or anything. The problem is that people have finite lives.
Mm-hmm.
People live for a short while. Country lives forever. People don't have a long horizon.
Mm-hmm.
People have to live their lives. When they live their lives, they are young and they grow old and they have children. That's a fact, right? Those facts can't be changed.
Yeah.
So you do have to save in your life to plan for your children and to plan for your old age.
Yeah.
So when you save, the question is, where do you put your money? If you recall, in the old days, our great great grandfathers and grandmothers used to
Mm-hmm.
stock up gold. They
Yeah.
used to put the gold under the mattress, or they used to wear the gold, right? That was a way of saving up money.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, how do you save up money? Since you're sitting overseas, you save up money either by buying gold. Sorry, you can still buy gold. You can buy some property, or you can buy some stock, or you can buy some other paper instrument which will take care of your old age and your children.
Mm-hmm.
Now the problem is that in Pakistan, unfortunately, because there's no paper, there's only government paper, which is the government bond. Stock market doesn't do very well, and stock market is not a deep market. It's a very shallow market. It doesn't give enough returns, and it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of always in a very weak position. So where do people go? People have only two choices: either take their money abroad, and then the government gets angry, why are you taking your money abroad? But then look, people who have a life to live have to worry about their old age,
Yeah.
so they have to take their money abroad. Then when the sort of rupee weakens against the dollar, it is always rational to hold dollars. And then,
Mm-hmm.
of course, last element that is left, which everywhere in the world happens, people buy real estate. It's an
Yeah.
asset. It's an
Yeah.
asset that people must hold. So inherently, there's nothing wrong with real estate, although people yell and scream a lot. Real estate is a good investment and it should happen. I'm all for real estate investments. But I think it's a government's fault that we have not developed enough assets for people to hold. And we
Mm-hmm.
should have assets. Like if I was sitting in the States, I lived in the States for a while, so I know I owned stocks and bonds and I owned real estate. All these things are assets that you accumulate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is where we must go, accumulate assets and
Mm-hmm.
make things happen. So there's nothing wrong with real estate. People should hold it and people should save. The problem is that the government doesn't give them enough avenues to save.
Yeah, that's the problem. Also, Pakistani people, I think they do not get more options or avenues to just invest, in different areas. So now, when if I talk about export, I just want to give you some figures that export to GDP rate high is almost 10%, and import to GDP is 25%, and investment, of course, to GDP is almost like 15%. So why it is figures are quite alarming. Yeah, where do you see flaws, and are there any lacking, any failure? What do you see, how do you see in your point of view that what are the problems, major problems?
We've written a lot about this. PID has written a lot about this. I've written lot about this, at least three or
Hmm.
four books.
Hmm.
The point is that, I mean, exports are not happening. Investment is not happening for all the reasons I gave you. When you got a weak state, when you got a
Hmm.
state that is administratively not efficient, when you got a state that is not investment friendly, when you got a state that's too uncertain in terms of its policy, that is always concerned about, hey, I'm going to gain power, and it's always fighting for power.
Hmm.
Obviously, people don't want to invest. When you invest at least for 10, 15-year horizon. You don't want to invest for today only, because
Right.
investment itself takes some time, and then building up a business takes time, and then building up profits takes time, and then you
Right.
have to think about reinvestment, etc. So people want to work and work for a long time. But here, when the government changes every few months, and then at the same time, when the government changes, their policies change all the time. Suddenly, there's a tax rate
Yeah.
that's gone up. Suddenly, there's something happened. Suddenly, there's a debt crisis. Then obviously, people don't like to invest. So
Hmm.
the issue that the government really has to change its model of operation
Hmm.
and really begin to think long term, develop solid institutions. So the IMF has got the government to agree to give independence to the central bank. I advocate the government should give also the Planning Commission, the Ministry of Finance independence. Let them run economic policy. Let the politicians struggle for power, but keep economics out of it. If they do that, then of course I think the economy will take off, will do very well. Right
Hmm.
now, because politics interferes and everybody wants to interfere with the economy, and everybody wants a subsidy, obviously it'll throw the economy into a tailspin, and that's what
Yeah.
we are seeing is happening.
Mm-hmm. Okay, when we talk about the fiscal budget, where one point I also want to highlight that almost what I just read it, that 18 to 20% administrative expenditure and 60 to 70% bureaucracy, which is of course what I see that is redundant. Do you think that it is justified? Where a lot more departments, they just do not work in a kind of active manner. So, what do you think? What would be your take on it?
I think the budget is our biggest problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that budget is the biggest problem because nobody wants to take the economy seriously. Parliament does not discuss the budget because we have made sure that there is no debate on the budget and there is no scrutiny by the Parliament. That is, we have enacted all these laws, 63A, etc., basically to stop the Parliament from scrutinizing the budget. So the budget is never taken seriously, but at the same time, there are so many losses that lie outside the budget. Those losses are huge, but those losses eventually have to be paid by the budget. At the
Mm-hmm.
same time, the government has too many departments. The government hangs on to dead capital, as we pointed out. Government has too many assets that are not working. Like government has too many houses for ministers and secretaries, and those
Yeah.
houses are basically a waste of capital. So all these things, there's a lot of reform that needs to happen. Government has these agencies like PIS, Steel Mill, etc., that are making losses, huge losses. Why are they making losses? But there is no penalty for making losses in the government. You can lose money and you will still be rewarded for it. So all
Mm-hmm.
these things are there. So this will continue. I
Okay.
think you're
The last question, if I just want to know that suppose what do you think, if we improve our, our economy of Pakistan? So some strategies or policies should be making, that. So what do you think from your point of view would be taking those kind of strategies, in a nutshell? But then later on, I'll ask you for another interview, inshallah.
In a nutshell, it's very simple, Karen. It's not simple, sorry. It's a very difficult thing.
Mm-hmm.
To turn around a country like Pakistan, what we need is really reimagining the way we run the state. I think our politicians also need to come together and look at the constitution seriously and try and figure out a constitution that is workable, where they can sit down and talk to each other, where fresh blood comes into parliament. We don't
Mm-hmm.
have to rely on the old dynasties. So our politicians too also have to give ground and understand that politics is not just for grabbing power.
Mm.
Politics is for determining how to run the country. The
Yeah.
second thing is also the politicians have to get out of many things. For example, all the public sector enterprise, the economy. Economy
Mm-hmm.
should be on politics.
Mm-hmm.
Politicians should give direction. They can tell us, for example, hey, I want low inflation, but then let the technocratic side decide inflation.
Mm.
They can tell us, hey, I want the poor to be looked after. Okay, then you let the technocratic side. So economy is a technocratic issue.
Right.
Energy is a technocratic issue. We have to do that. But then again, we have to also build systems where we can build good technocratic systems on how to run the economy, how to run the public sector enterprises, how to run the financial system. If we can do that, Pakistan can take off fairly quickly. Lastly, what we have to accept is the fact that economic decision making happens in markets.
Mm-hmm.
The government should be in economic decision making. So we need to reduce the footprint of the government. What we talk about all the time is, and we've made estimates of that the footprint of the government is huge.
Mm-hmm.
The amount that the government regulates and controls in the economy is huge. The government is in the wheat market, the government is in the fertilizer market, the government is in the sugar market. The government
Everywhere.
has to get the government has to stop hoarding real estate. The government has to stop providing real estate and lifetime guarantees to public sector workers.
Yeah.
Public sector workers have to be subject to accountability. Public sector workers have to perform, and that politicians can't hand out public sector workers like it's their grandmother's farm. They have to be serious. They have to really begin to take the politicians are for sitting in legislatures. They must sit in legislatures. They
Right.
must not try and control everything in the economy. If we can get this kind of thinking going, yes, of course, things will change.
Right. Okay. So thanks a lot to yourself. And I hope that we can conduct another interview so soon, inshallah. I'll just
Inshallah.
ask you.
Inshallah.
Yes. So for now,
Thank you.
just have a lovely day and closing here now. Inshallah, going to see you soon again. And we
Thank
can
you,
hope,
Karan. Thank you.
yes, we can hope for the betterment in our Pakistan's economy as well.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.